The sound of splintering wood ripped through the silence of my apartment at 3 in the morning. I bolted upright in bed, my training kicking in before my mind fully processed what was happening. Someone was breaking down my door. My hand instinctively reached for the Glock 19 in my nightstand, but then I heard the voice that made my blood run cold. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jessica, open this damn door before I tear it off the hinges. It was my stepfather, Marcus Webb, and he was drunk. Again. I threw on a robe and rushed to the living room where my front door hung at an awkward angle, the deadbolt torn clean through the frame. Marcus stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, his face flushed red with alcohol and rage. Behind him, cowering in the hallway, was my mother, Elena. Even in the dim light from the corridor, I could see the fresh bruise blooming across her left cheek, the way she held her arm protectively against her ribs. My name is Jessica Rivera, and until that night, I thought I'd left the chaos of my childhood behind in the dust of Millbrook, Colorado. I was 26 years old, a staff sergeant in the United States Army, stationed at Fort Carson. I had my own apartment off base, a spotless service record, and a future that finally felt like it belonged to me. But family has a way of dragging you back into the darkness you thought you'd escaped. Marcus Webb wasn't my real father. He'd married my mother when I was 12, right after my biological father died in a construction accident. At first, Marcus seemed like salvation. He was steady, employed at the local mine, and he made my mom smile again after months of watching her cry herself to sleep. But that honeymoon period lasted exactly until the wedding rings were on their fingers. "You think you're so high and mighty now, don't you?" Marcus slurred, stepping further into my apartment. "Living in your fancy place, wearing that uniform like you're somebody special." I positioned myself between him and my mother, my military training automatically assessing the situation. Marcus was 6'2" and probably weighed 220, but he was drunk and unsteady. More importantly, he was angry, and angry drunk men make mistakes. "Marcus, you need to leave," I said, keeping my voice level and authoritative. "You're intoxicated and you've damaged my property. I can have the MPs here in 5 minutes." He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off my apartment walls. "MPs? You think I'm scared of your little toy soldiers? I was breaking rocks with a pickaxe while you were still playing dress up." My mother finally found her voice. "Marcus, please, let's just go home. Jessica doesn't need to be involved in this." "Shut up, Elena," he snapped, not even looking at her. "This is between me and your daughter, the one who thinks she's too good for her own family." That's when I saw it. The way my mother flinched when he raised his voice, the practiced way she stepped back, making herself smaller, the careful positioning of her body to protect her injured side. This wasn't the first time. Maybe it wasn't even the 10th time. "How long?" I asked quietly. "How long what?" Marcus demanded. "How long have you been hitting my mother?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, denial, then something ugly and defiant. "I don't hit anybody. Your mother's clumsy, always has been. Tell her, Elena." I looked at my mom, really looked at her. She was 51 years old, but she looked older. Her once bright eyes were dull, her shoulders permanently hunched, as if she was always bracing for the next blow. When had she become so small? "Mom," I said gently, "tell me the truth." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted between Marcus and me, calculating some equation I couldn't see. Finally, she whispered, "I fell down the stairs." Marcus nodded smugly. "See? Clumsy, always making up stories to get attention." But I knew my mother. I'd grown up watching her navigate the world with grace and precision. She didn't fall downstairs. She didn't walk into doors. She didn't bruise her own ribs. "Get out," I said to Marcus. "Excuse me?" I said, "Get out now. And if you ever lay a hand on her again, if you even raise your voice to her, I will end you." Marcus stepped closer, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. You'll end me. You're all talk, Jessica. You always have been. You think putting on that uniform makes you tough? You think your little army games mean anything in the real world? Try me. For a moment, we stood there facing each other, and I could see him weighing his options. I was smaller than him, sure, but I was sober, trained, and absolutely furious. More than that, I was done pretending this was normal. Come on, Elena. We're leaving. Your daughter wants to play soldier. Let her play. My mother started to follow him, but I caught her arm gently. Mom, you don't have to go with him. You can stay here. She looked at me with such sadness it nearly broke my heart. You don't understand, Mija. It's not that simple. It is that simple. He hits you.
That's a crime. I can help you. Marcus turned back from the doorway. She's not going anywhere. Elena knows where she belongs. Don't you, honey? The way he said it, soft and menacing, made my skin crawl. But my mother nodded and walked past me toward the door. I'll call you tomorrow, she whispered as she passed. After they left, I sat in my living room staring at my broken door and thinking about the last 14 years. How many signs had I missed? How many phone calls where my mother's voice was just a little too bright, a little too careful? How many times had she made excuses for bruises, for canceled plans, for the way she seemed to disappear a little more each time I saw her? I'd been so focused on escaping Millbrook, on building my own life, that I'd left her behind with a monster. But I wasn't that scared 12-year-old girl anymore. I was Staff Sergeant Jessica Rivera, and I had resources Marcus Webb couldn't even imagine. I picked up my phone and made the first of several calls that would change everything. The next morning, I requested emergency leave from my commanding officer, Captain Martinez. I didn't go into details, just said I had a family crisis that required my immediate attention. Military families understand that sometimes life comes at you fast, and Captain Martinez approved the leave without question. Take care of whatever you need to take care of, Sergeant Rivera, he said. Your squad will be here when you get back. I drove the 2 hours to Millbrook in my pickup truck, using the time to think and plan. Millbrook was the kind of small Colorado mining town where everybody knew everybody's business, or thought they did. It was nestled in a valley between two mountain ranges, picturesque in the way that attracted tourists, but rough in the way that broke the people who actually lived there. The town hadn't changed much since I left for the Army 8 years ago. Main Street still had more empty storefronts than occupied ones. The Copper Mine Diner still served coffee strong enough to dissolve paint. The old mining equipment still rusted in the town square like monuments to better days that might never have actually existed. I drove past my old high school, past the trailer park where I'd grown up, past the cemetery where my father was buried. Finally, I pulled up in front of the small house my mother and Marcus shared on Elm Street. It was a modest place, probably built in the 50s, with a front porch that sagged slightly and paint that had seen better decades. Marcus's truck wasn't in the driveway. Good. I knocked on the front door and waited. When my mother answered, she looked surprised and a little frightened. Jessica, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Mom. Can I come in? She glanced nervously up and down the street before stepping aside to let me in. The house was clean but felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Family photos lined the mantel over the fireplace, but I noticed that most of them were from before Marcus came into the picture. The few that included him showed my mother standing slightly apart, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Marcus is at work, she said quickly, as if I'd asked. He won't be home until after 6. Good. That gives us time to talk. I sat down on the couch and patted the cushion beside me. My mother perched on the edge like she was ready to run. Mom, I need you to be honest with me. How long has Marcus been hurting you? He doesn't. Please. I took her hands in mine. They were smaller than I remembered, more fragile. I saw the bruises last night. I saw how you moved, how you reacted to him. I'm not stupid, and I'm not 12 anymore. How long? She was quiet for a long time, staring down at our joined hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. It started about 3 years ago. Small things at first. He'd had a bad day at the mine, or he'd been drinking with his friends. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that he was just under stress. But it got worse. She nodded. The mine started laying people off. Marcus was worried about his job, worried about money. The drinking got heavier, and when he drank, she trailed off. What happened last night? Why did he come to my apartment? My mother's face crumpled slightly. I mentioned that you'd been promoted again, that you were doing well in the army. I was proud of you, mija. I just wanted to share good news. But Marcus, he got angry. He said you thought you were better than us and that you'd forgotten where you came from. Then he started drinking and talking about how he was going to teach you some respect. So you came with him to protect me. I was scared of what he might do. When Marcus gets angry and drunk, he doesn't think straight. I thought maybe if I was there, I could calm him down. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw what 14 years of living with Marcus Webb had done to her. She'd been a vibrant, confident woman when she married him. Now she was a shadow, constantly calculating how to avoid the next explosion. Mom, this has to stop. You know that, right? It's not that easy, Jessica. I don't have anywhere else to go. I don't have any money of my own. Marcus controls everything. That's called financial abuse. It's one of the ways abusers keep their victims trapped. She looked surprised. Victims? I'm not a victim.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
I'm just... What? What are you just? She couldn't finish the sentence. I spent the next hour gently extracting information from my mother. The pattern was depressingly familiar. Marcus had slowly isolated her from her friends, convinced her that her family didn't care about her, and made her financially dependent on him. He monitored her phone calls, controlled their bank accounts, and had convinced her that no one would believe her if she ever spoke up. He says I'm lucky to have him, she said quietly, that no other man would want me. Mom, that's not true. That's what abusers do. They tear you down so you won't realize you have other options. What options? I'm 51 years old. I haven't worked in years. Who's going to hire me? I wanted to shake her, to make her see that she was worth so much more than Marcus Webb would ever be. But I also understood that 14 years of psychological abuse had done damage that couldn't be repaired with a single conversation. I'm going to help you, but I need you to trust me. Jessica, you don't understand. If Marcus thinks I've been talking to you about this, he'll be furious. He'll hurt me worse than he ever has. Not if he can't get to you. Mom, I'm trained for this kind of thing. The military doesn't just teach you how to shoot guns and follow orders. They teach you strategy, planning, resource management. I know how to handle dangerous situations. She looked at me skeptically. This isn't Afghanistan, mija. This is real life. Mom, I've been deployed twice. I've led convoys through hostile territory. I've coordinated security for high-value targets. Trust me when I tell you that dealing with one abusive drunk in a small Colorado town is well within my skill set. For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. We spent the rest of the afternoon going through her situation systematically. I documented every bruise, every incident she could remember, every threat Marcus had made. I took photos of the damage to my apartment door. I made notes about his drinking habits, his work schedule, his friends and associates. Most importantly, I started building a safety plan. The first thing we need to do is get you somewhere safe, I said. I have friends in Colorado Springs who can put you up for a while. Military families take care of each other. I can't just leave. What about my things? What about the house? Things can be replaced, Mom. You can't. As for the house, we'll deal with that later. Right now, the priority is getting you somewhere Marcus can't hurt you. She was weakening. I could see it in the way her shoulders straightened slightly, the way her voice grew a little stronger. What about Marcus? When he finds out I'm gone, he'll go crazy. I smiled.
And it wasn't a nice smile. Let me worry about Marcus. That evening, I drove my mother to Colorado Springs and got her settled in the guest room of my friend Sarah's house. Sarah was a fellow sergeant I'd served with in Afghanistan, and she understood without explanation why a woman might need to disappear for a while. "Take as long as you need," Sarah told my mother. "I've been where you are. I know how scary this is, but you're safe now." I drove back to Millbrook alone, arriving just after midnight. Marcus's truck was in the driveway, but the house was dark. Perfect. I parked down the street and walked back to the house, using skills I'd learned in urban warfare training. I approached from the back, staying in the shadows, and peered through the kitchen window. Marcus was passed out at the kitchen table, an empty whiskey bottle beside him. I could have confronted him right then, could have woken him up and told him exactly what I thought of men who hit women. But that would have been emotionally satisfying and strategically stupid. Instead, I went back to my truck and started making phone calls. The first call was to Detective Raymond Garcia of the Colorado Springs Police Department. Ray was a friend of Sarah's, a cop who specialized in domestic violence cases. I'd met him at a military police cooperation training session the year before. "Ray, it's Jessica Rivera, Sarah Thompson's friend. I need some advice about a domestic violence situation." "Official or unofficial?" "Let's start with unofficial and see where it goes." I laid out the situation for him, Marcus's pattern of abuse, the threats against me, the way he controlled my mother financially and emotionally. Ray listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Your mother's willing to press charges?" he asked finally. "She's scared, but I think she's getting there. What I need to know is how to build the strongest possible case." "Documentation is key. Photos, medical records, witness statements if you can get them, financial records showing the control patterns, any recordings of threats or admissions." "What about the fact that he broke into my apartment?" "That's breaking and entering, criminal mischief, possibly intimidation. If you file charges, it gives us leverage, makes him take the situation seriously." We talked for another 20 minutes. Ray gave me the names of some domestic violence advocates in the area, talked me through the process of filing restraining orders, and explained how the military's family advocacy program could provide additional resources. "One more thing," he said before we hung up. "Be careful." When abusers realize they're losing control, they often escalate. This Marcus guy sounds unstable. Don't underestimate what he might do if he feels cornered. The next morning, I was waiting outside the Millbrook Police Department when it opened at 8 a.m. The building was small and outdated, with exactly 3 patrol cars in the lot. I walked in and asked to speak to whoever handled domestic violence cases. Chief Bill Morrison came out to meet me. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s, the kind of small-town cop who probably knew every resident by name and every family secret by heart. "You're Elena Webb's daughter," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm Jessica Rivera. Elena is my mother." "I heard you joined the Army. How's that working out for you?" "Very well, thank you. I'm here to report a crime." His expression shifted slightly. "What kind of crime?" "My stepfather, Marcus Webb, broke into my apartment in Colorado Springs early yesterday morning. He damaged my property and made threats against both my mother and me. I'd like to file charges." Chief Morrison gestured toward his office. "Why don't we sit down and you can tell me the whole story." I spent the next hour laying out everything I'd learned, everything I documented. Chief Morrison listened carefully, taking notes, asking the right questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "This is a complicated situation, Jessica. Marcus Webb has lived in this town for 15 years. He works hard, pays his taxes, doesn't cause trouble. Baiting your wife isn't causing trouble? I'm not saying I approve of domestic violence, but marriages are complicated things. Sometimes people have disagreements." I felt my temper starting to rise, but I kept my voice level. "Chief Morrison, with all due respect, this isn't a disagreement. This is a pattern of escalating abuse that's going to end with my mother in the hospital or the morgue." "Has your mother filed a complaint?" "She's afraid to. That's how abuse works. The abuser convinces the victim that no one will believe them, that they deserved it, that they have no other options." Chief Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Look, Jessica, I understand you're concerned about your mother, But Elena's never come to us for help. She's never filed a complaint, never pressed charges. Without her cooperation, there's not much we can do. What about the breaking and entering charge? That's between Marcus and me. My mother doesn't need to be involved. Well, that did happen in Colorado Springs. That's out of my jurisdiction. I could see where this was heading. Chief Morrison was going to do exactly nothing, and Marcus would continue terrorizing my mother with the tacit approval of local law enforcement. Chief Morrison, let me ask you something. How many domestic violence calls do you get in this town? Not many, maybe 2 or 3 a year. And how many do you think go unreported because the victims are too scared to call? He didn't answer. I stood up and placed my business card on his desk. When Marcus Webb kills my mother, and he will if someone doesn't stop him, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that I came to you for help and you chose to do nothing. I walked out of the police station feeling frustrated but not surprised. Small-town cops often had complicated relationships with domestic violence, especially when the abuser was a longtime resident with no prior arrests. But I had other resources. My next stop was the offices of Mountain Valley Legal Aid, a nonprofit organization that provided free legal services to low-income residents. The director, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Hernandez, listened to my story with the focused attention of someone who'd heard variations of it many times before. Your mother needs to file for a restraining order, she said. Colorado has strong domestic violence laws, but the victim has to be willing to use them. She's getting there. The question is, what happens when Marcus violates the restraining order? Because he will. Then he gets arrested. Violating a protection order is a crime. By the Millbrook Police Department, the same department that just told me domestic violence is a private family matter? Patricia's expression darkened. Bill Morrison said that? In so many words. That's unacceptable. I'll have a conversation with him. We spent the next hour developing a comprehensive legal strategy. Patricia agreed to represent my mother pro bono and explain the process for filing restraining orders, documenting assets for divorce proceedings, and ensuring my mother would have access to financial support during the transition. The most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim is when they're trying to leave, Patricia warned. Statistics show that's when most domestic homicides occur. We need to be very careful about how we handle this. That's why I'm here. I'm not going to let anything happen to her. Patricia looked curiously. You seem very confident for someone dealing with their first domestic violence case. This isn't my first case. It's my first personal case. But I've dealt with domestic violence situations before. In the military, we take care of our own. That afternoon, I drove to the Copper Mountain mine where Marcus worked. It was shift change, and I waited in my truck as workers streamed out of the facility. Most of them looked tired, dirty, and ready to get home. Marcus emerged with a group of 3 other men, all of them laughing about something. I followed at a distance as they drove to Murphy's Tavern, the local bar where half the town seemed to spend their evenings. I parked across the street and watched through the window as Marcus and his friends settled in for what looked like a long drinking session. This was information gathering, not confrontation. I needed to understand Marcus's patterns, his relationships, his weaknesses. Military intelligence gathering applied to domestic situations. I stayed until closing time, watching Marcus get progressively drunker and louder. His friends eventually left, but Marcus stayed until last call.
When he finally stumbled out to his truck, I had to resist the urge to call the police and report him for drunk driving. But that would have been a short-term solution to a long-term problem. I needed something more permanent. The next morning, I drove back to Colorado Springs to check on my mother. I found her in Sarah's kitchen, helping with breakfast and looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. How are you feeling, Mom? Better. Scared, but better. Sarah's been telling me about the resources available for women in my situation. I had no idea there was so much help out there. Are you ready to take the next step? She took a deep breath. I think so. What do I need to do? We start with the restraining order. Then we work on getting you financially independent. But first, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. What is it? Do you think Marcus is capable of seriously hurting you? Or me? My mother was quiet for a long time. I think Marcus is capable of anything when he's angry enough. And finding out that I've left him, that I'm taking legal action against him, that's going to make him angrier than he's ever been. Then we need to be prepared for that. I spent the rest of the day making preparations. I contacted the family readiness group at Fort Carson and explained that I had a family member in danger. The Army takes care of its own, and within hours I had access to resources I never could have imagined as a civilian. A military lawyer reviewed all of Patricia Hernandez's paperwork. A military social worker provided additional counseling resources for my mother. Most importantly, the base commander authorized extended leave for me to handle the family emergency. "Take whatever time you need, Sergeant Rivera," Major Collins told me over the phone. "Your service record speaks for itself. The Army will be here when you're ready to come back." That evening, I sat down with my mother and Sarah to finalize our plan. "Tomorrow, we filed a restraining order," I said. "The day after that, we start divorce proceedings. I've already found you a job at the base exchange that will give you health benefits and enough income to live independently." "What about the house?" my mother asked. "You're entitled to half of everything. Patricia will handle the property settlement." "And what about Marcus? What happens when he realizes what's happening?" I looked at my mother seriously. "Mom, Marcus is going to be angry. He's going to try to intimidate you, threaten you, maybe even hurt you. But here's what he doesn't know." "What?" "He doesn't know who I am. He thinks I'm just his stepdaughter who joined the Army to get away from home. He has no idea what I'm actually capable of." Sarah laughed. "Marcus Webb is about to get a very unpleasant education." The next morning, we walked into the El Paso County Courthouse together. My mother was nervous but determined. She wore a blue dress that brought out her eyes and carried herself with more dignity than I'd seen her from in years. The restraining order hearing was straightforward. Patricia presented our evidence, my mother testified about the pattern of abuse, and the judge granted a temporary protection order without hesitation. "Mr. Webb is not to contact you, come near you, or threaten you in any way," Judge Martinez explained to my mother. "Violation of this order is a criminal offense punishable by immediate arrest." As we walked out of the courthouse, my mother seemed to stand a little taller. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Free," she said. "For the first time in years, I feel free." But I knew the real test was yet to come. Marcus would be served with a restraining order within 24 hours, and then we'd find out exactly what kind of man we were dealing with. I didn't have to wait long to find out. Marcus Webb received the restraining order papers at 11:37 on a Thursday morning. I know the exact time because I was parked across the street from the mine when the sheriff's deputy walked up to him during his lunch break. Through my binoculars, I watched Marcus read the papers, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally pure rage. He crumpled the documents in his fist, threw them on the ground, and started screaming at the deputy. Even from a distance, I could see the veins bolting in his neck. The deputy, a young man who probably wasn't prepared for that level of hostility, took a step back and kept his hand near his weapon. Smart move. Marcus was operating on adrenaline and fury now, and that made him unpredictable. After the deputy left, Marcus stood in the mine parking lot for a full 10 minutes, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. His coworkers gave him a wide berth, sensing the violence radiating from him. Finally, he got in his truck and tore out of the parking lot, gravel spraying behind his tires. I followed at a safe distance, already knowing where he was headed. Marcus drove straight to Murphy's Tavern, despite it being barely noon on a weekday. He was inside for less than 20 minutes before he came storming back out, followed by the bartender named Tommy, who looked like he'd ground his share of troublemakers out over the years. "I told you, Marcus, you're cut off until you calm down. I'm not serving anybody who's talking about shooting people." My blood went cold. Shooting people? That escalated quickly. Marcus got back in his truck and sat there for several minutes, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel. I could see him having some kind of internal debate. Finally, he pulled out his cell phone and made a call. The conversation was animated, his free hand gesturing wildly, even though whoever he was talking to couldn't see him. After the call ended, Marcus drove to Elm Street and parked in front of the house he'd shared with my mother. He sat there for another 10 minutes before getting out and walking up to the front door. When he realized she wasn't home, he went around to the back and tried every window, every door.
When that didn't work, he started yelling. "Elena, I know you're in there. Come out here and face me like a woman instead of hiding behind your daughter." The neighbors started coming out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Patterson from next door, an elderly woman who'd lived on Elm Street for 40 years, approached the property line. "Marcus, she's not here," Mrs. Patterson called out. "Haven't seen her for days." "Where is she?" Marcus demanded. "Don't know, but you're scaring people carrying on like this." Marcus looked around and seemed to realize he had an audience. For a moment, I thought he might calm down. Instead, he walked over to his truck and pulled out a tire iron. "She thinks she can just leave?" he shouted, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. "She thinks she can humiliate me in front of the whole town?" He swung the tire iron at my mother's flower garden, destroying the rose bushes she'd spent years cultivating. Then he moved on to the windows, systematically smashing every piece of glass on the ground floor of the house. Mrs. Patterson had her phone out, and I could see her dialing what I assumed was 911. Good. This was all being documented. After destroying the windows, Marcus threw the tire iron through the front door, splintering the wood around the lock. He disappeared inside the house, and I could hear crashing sounds as he destroyed whatever he could get his hands on. The Millbrook police arrived 15 minutes later. 2 patrol cars, 3 officers, including Chief Morrison himself. They approached the house cautiously, hands on their weapons. "Marcus Webb," Chief Morrison called out, "come out of the house with your hands visible." Marcus emerged from the front door, his shirt torn, his hands bleeding from broken glass. He looked like a man who'd completely lost his grip on reality. "Bill, thank God you're here," Marcus said, as if the police had arrived to help him rather than arrest him. "My wife's gone crazy. She's filing false charges against me, trying to steal my house." "Marcus, you're in violation of a restraining order," Chief Morrison said. "You're not supposed to be here." "Restraining order? That's garbage. Elena's my wife. This is my house. I have every right to be here." "Not anymore, you don't. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." For a moment, I thought Marcus was going to comply. Then his face twisted with rage again. "This is all that daughter of hers. She's the one poisoning Elena against me. She thinks because she's got a uniform, she can destroy my family?" "Turn around, Marcus. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Marcus looked around wildly, as if searching for an escape route. His eyes landed on Mrs. Patterson, who was still recording everything with her phone. "You old witch! This is all your fault. You've been filling Elena's head with lies." He took a step toward Mrs. Patterson, and that's when the officers moved. It took all 3 of them to get Marcus on the ground and handcuffed. He fought them every step of the way, screaming about conspiracy theories and false accusations and ungrateful women who didn't know their place. As they loaded him into the patrol car, Marcus looked directly at the spot where I was parked, almost as if he could sense I was there. His eyes were wild, unfocused, but filled with a hatred, so pure it made my skin crawl. The patrol car pulled away, taking Marcus to the county jail. I waited until the neighbors had gone back inside their houses before driving closer to the house on Elm Street. The damage was extensive. Every ground floor window was broken, the front door hung at an angle, and through the openings I could see the destruction Marcus had wreaked inside. Mrs. Patterson was still standing in her yard, shaking her head sadly. "Excuse me," I said, getting out of my truck. "I'm Jessica Rivera, Elena's daughter." "Oh, honey," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice full of sympathy. "I'm so sorry about all this. Your mother is such a sweet woman. She didn't deserve any of this." "How long has Marcus been like this?" Mrs. Patterson glanced down nervously. "I probably shouldn't say anything. People in this town, they mind their own business, you know." "Mrs. Patterson, my mother could have been in that house when Marcus lost his mind. She could have been seriously hurt or killed. I need to know what you've witnessed." The older woman sighed. "It's been getting worse for years. The yelling, the fighting. Elena stopped coming to neighborhood barbecues, stopped talking to friends. When I did see her, she was always making excuses for bruises, for black eyes. Why didn't anyone call the police?" "Some of us tried, but Chief Morrison,
He's old-fashioned. Thinks what happens between a man and his wife is private business. And Marcus, he's got friends in this town. People who'd vouch for him say Elena was making things up for attention. I felt a familiar surge of anger. My mother had been isolated not just by Marcus, but by an entire community that chose to look the other way. Mrs. Patterson, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to write down everything you just told me. Dates, times, specific incidents. Can you do that?
She nodded eagerly. Anything to help Elena. That woman has suffered enough. I gave her my contact information and drove back toward Colorado Springs, my mind racing. Marcus's public meltdown had been perfect from a legal standpoint. Multiple witnesses, property destruction, violation of a restraining order. Even Chief Morrison couldn't ignore evidence that blatant. But Marcus's reaction also told me something troubling. This wasn't a man who was going to accept defeat gracefully. This was a man who'd felt like his entire identity had been challenged, and he was going to fight back with everything he had. I called Patricia Hernandez from the road. Patricia, it's Jessica Rivera. Marcus just violated the restraining order in spectacular fashion. He destroyed my mother's house and was arrested in front of half the neighborhood. That's actually good news from a legal perspective. Violation of a protection order is a felony in Colorado. With witnesses and property damage, he's looking at serious jail time. What about bail? Given the nature of the charges and his obvious instability, I'll ask for high bail with conditions. No contact with your mother, no alcohol, and GPS monitoring if possible. Patricia, I need you to understand something. Marcus Webb is not going to stop. Jail time, restraining orders, none of that is going to deter him. In his mind, my mother belongs to him, and I'm the enemy who stole her away. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to be prepared for him to escalate further. And when he does, we need to be ready. That evening, I sat in Sarah's living room with my mother, explaining what had happened. My mother listened in stunned silence as I described Marcus's rampage. He destroyed the house? She whispered. I'm sorry, Mom. I know that place had a lot of memories for you. Not good ones, she said quietly. But still, it was my home for 14 years. It was never your home. It was his prison for you. Now you're free. My mother looked at me with something I hadn't seen in her eyes for years. Determination. What do we do now? Now, we build a case so strong that Marcus Webb never sees the outside of a prison cell again. Over the next 3 days, I worked with the methodical precision I'd learned in military intelligence. I interviewed neighbors, collected witness statements, and documented every aspect of Marcus's pattern of abuse. Mrs. Patterson proved to be a goldmine of information, providing a detailed timeline of incidents going back years. More importantly, I started building a profile of Marcus's associates, his habits, and his potential resources. The military had taught me that you can't defeat an enemy until you understand them completely. Marcus Webb was 52 years old, born and raised in Millbrook. He'd worked at the mine for 16 years, ever since marrying my mother. Before that, he'd drifted between jobs, mostly construction and manual labor. He had 2 DUI convictions from his 20s, but nothing since then. No military service, no advanced education, no particular skills beyond swinging a pickaxe and drinking beer. His social circle consisted mainly of other miners and the regulars at Murphy's Tavern. Men like himself who felt like the world had passed them by, who found comfort in complaining about women and minorities and politicians who didn't understand real Americans. It was a toxic environment that fed on resentment and machismo. Marcus had no children from previous relationships, no close family in the area. My mother had been his whole world, the one thing that made him feel important and in control. Now that she was gone, he had nothing left except his rage. On Friday afternoon, I got a call from Patricia Hernandez. Marcus made bail, she said, without preamble. My blood went cold. How much? $50,000. He put up the house as collateral. What about the conditions? No contact with your mother, no alcohol, and he's supposed to stay away from her workplace and known associates. But Jessica, GPS monitoring was denied. The judge said there wasn't enough evidence of flight risk. I closed my eyes and tried to control my temper. Patricia, this man just destroyed a house with a tire iron while screaming about shooting people. How is that not evidence of danger to the community? I argued that point. The judge wasn't convinced. He said Marcus was clearly upset about the divorce proceedings, but that his actions were directed at property, not people. That's going to change. What do you mean?
I mean, Marcus Webb is not going to sit quietly in his damaged house and wait for his court date. He's going to come after my mother, and when he does, someone's going to get hurt. That evening, I moved my mother from Sarah's house to a safe house run by a nonprofit organization that specialized in protecting domestic violence victims. The location was confidential, the staff was trained in security protocols, and there was 24-hour monitoring. I feel like I'm in witness protection, my mother said as we walked through the facility. You basically are. Marcus is going to be looking for you, and we can't take any chances. The safe house was more comfortable than I had expected. My mother had her own room, access to counseling services, legal aid, and job training programs. For the first time in years, she was surrounded by people who understood her situation and were committed to helping her rebuild her life. But I knew it was only a temporary solution. Marcus would eventually figure out where she was, or he'd do something desperate enough to force a confrontation. Either way, this was far from over. On Saturday morning, I drove back to Millbrook to assess the situation. Marcus's truck was parked in the driveway of the damaged house, and I could see lights on inside despite the broken windows. He'd apparently decided to stay there despite the lack of heat and the security issues. I parked at the end of the street and used my binoculars to observe the house. For 3 hours, I saw no movement, no signs of activity. Then, around noon, Marcus emerged from the house carrying a duffel bag and what looked like a rifle case. My heart rate spiked. I'd been expecting him to escalate, but I hadn't anticipated weapons this quickly. Marcus loaded the items into his truck and drove away. I followed at a distance as he headed toward the outskirts of town. He pulled into the parking lot of Rocky Mountain Sporting Goods, a gun store that also served as an informal gathering place for local hunters and gun enthusiasts. I parked across the street and watched as Marcus went inside, carrying the rifle case. He was inside for over an hour, and when he came out, he was carrying a much larger case and a bag that I assumed contained ammunition. This was a problem.
A big problem. I called Detective Garcia in Colorado Springs. Ray, it's Jessica Rivera. We have a situation. Marcus Webb just made bail, and I have reason to believe he's arming himself. What kind of reason? I described what I'd observed at the gun store. Ray was quiet for a long moment. Jessica, I need you to be very careful here. If this guy is as unstable as you say, and now he's got access to firearms, this could turn into a hostage situation or worse. What do you recommend? Official channels. File a report with local law enforcement about the weapons purchase. Request modification of his bail conditions based on the new threat level. Ray, local law enforcement is Chief Morrison, who thinks domestic violence is a private family matter. Then we go over his head. State police, FBI, if necessary. But Jessica, I need you to promise me something. What? Don't try to handle this yourself. I know you're military. I know you're trained. But this isn't Afghanistan. This is a domestic situation with a lot of legal complications. Let the professionals handle it. I promised Ray I'd be careful, but we both knew that promise didn't mean much if Marcus came looking for my mother. That afternoon, I called a meeting with Patricia Hernandez, Detective Garcia, and a victim's advocate from the safe house. We met at the Colorado Springs police station in a conference room that smelled of coffee and stale cigarettes. The situation has escalated significantly, I began. Marcus is out on bail, he's armed, and he's demonstrated a complete disregard for legal consequences. We need to assume he's planning something. Patricia spoke up. I've already filed a motion to revoke his bail based on the weapons purchase and his violation of the no alcohol condition. How do we know he violated the no alcohol condition? I drove past Murphy's Tavern last night, I said. His truck was in the parking lot from 8 p.m. until closing time. Detective Garcia leaned forward. Jessica, I told you not to pursue this on your own. I'm not pursuing anything. I'm gathering intelligence. There's a difference. The victim's advocate, a woman named Carol Martinez, had been quiet through most of the meeting. Finally, she spoke. I've been doing this work for 15 years, she said. I've seen dozens of cases like this. When an abuser reaches this level of desperation, when they feel like they've lost everything, they often decide that if they can't have their victim, no one can. You're talking about murder-suicide, Patricia said. Carol nodded. It's more common than people think, especially in cases where the abuser has access to firearms and feels like the entire community has turned against them. We spent the next hour developing protocols for protecting my mother while also building the legal case against Marcus. The safe house would increase security. Patricia would expedite the bail revocation motion. Detective Garcia would coordinate with state law enforcement to monitor Marcus's activities. But I knew that all of our precautions might not be enough. Marcus Webb was operating outside the bounds of rational behavior now, and rational solutions might not be sufficient. That night, I drove back to the safe house to check on my mother. I found her in the common room, talking with other women who'd escaped abusive relationships. For the first time since this whole situation began, she looked relaxed, almost peaceful. "How are you holding up, Mom?" "Better than I expected. Hearing other women's stories, realizing I'm not alone in this, it helps." I sat down beside her. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Marcus is out on bail, and we have reason to believe he's planning something dangerous." Her face went pale. "What kind of dangerous?" "He's been buying weapons. He's drinking heavily. He's talking about revenge. We think he might try to hurt you." My mother was quiet for a long time. "He's going to kill me, isn't he? Not if I have anything to say about it." She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much pain. "Jessica, you can't protect me from Marcus forever. He's obsessed. He won't stop until one of us is dead." "Then we make sure it's not you." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. My mother reached over and took my hand. "I don't want you to do anything that'll destroy your life. You've worked so hard to build something good for yourself. Mom, you are something good in my life. You're the reason I know the difference between right and wrong. I'm not going to let Marcus Webb take that away from me." We sat in silence for a while, two women who'd been shaped by violence but refused to be defined by it. Outside, the Colorado wind howled through the mountains, carrying the promise of winter and change. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was Carol Martinez from the safe house. "Jessica, you need to get over here immediately." "What's wrong?" "Marcus found us." I was dressed and in my truck within 5 minutes, driving toward the safe house with my heart pounding. I called Detective Garcia from the road. "Ray, Marcus Webb has located the safe house. I need backup and I need it now." "I'm already on my way. Colorado Springs Police is sending units as well. Do not engage him until we arrive." "Is my mother safe?" "Carol says everyone is secure inside."
The facility has good security protocols, but Jessica, this confirms our worst fears. This guy is not going to stop. I arrived at the safe house to find Marcus's truck parked across the street. He was sitting behind the wheel, engine running, staring at the building like a predator watching prey. 2 Colorado Springs police units had already arrived and were approaching his vehicle. I parked behind the police cars and got out, despite Detective Garcia's instructions to wait. I needed to see this for myself. The officers approached Marcus's truck with weapons drawn, but not aimed. They were trying to de-escalate, but I could see the tension in their posture. This was a situation that could go sideways quickly. "Mr. Webb, I need you to turn off the engine and step out of the vehicle," one of the officers called out. Marcus rolled down his window but didn't get out. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just sitting here." "Sir, you're in violation of a restraining order. This facility houses the person you're prohibited from contacting." "I don't know who's in there. I'm just sitting on a public street." It was a weak defense, but Marcus was right about one thing. Technically, he wasn't trespassing or making contact. He was just being a menacing presence, which was harder to prosecute. The standoff continued for 20 minutes. Marcus refused to leave, the police couldn't arrest him for sitting in his truck, and everyone knew this was just the beginning of something much worse. Finally, Detective Garcia arrived and approached my position. "This is exactly what we were afraid of," he said quietly. "He's testing boundaries, seeing how close he can get." "What's our next move?" "We document everything, we increase security at the safe house, and we hope the judge revokes his bail before he does something irreversible." As if summoned by our conversation, Marcus suddenly started his truck and drove away, but not before rolling down his window and shouting something that made my blood run cold. "Tell Elena I'll be seeing her real soon." The message was clear. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything.
I called my commanding officer at Fort Carson. Major Collins, it's Sergeant Rivera. I need to request additional leave, and I need to be completely honest with you about why. What's the situation, Sergeant? I laid out the entire scenario for him, from Marcus's abuse of my mother to his escalating threats and today's incident at the safe house. Major Collins listened without interruption. Sergeant Rivera, this sounds like a situation that requires law enforcement intervention. Sir, with respect, law enforcement is doing what they can within legal constraints, but those constraints don't account for a man who's completely lost his grip on reality. My mother is in real danger, and I'm the only one with the training and resources to protect her. Major Collins was quiet for a long moment. What exactly are you asking for, Sergeant? Permission to handle this situation using whatever means necessary. I can't officially authorize that, Sergeant. The military doesn't operate on domestic soil, and we certainly don't take action against American citizens. Understood, sir. I'm not asking for official authorization. I'm asking for your personal understanding of why I might need to make some difficult choices in the coming days. Another long pause. Sergeant Rivera, your service record is exemplary. You've served 2 combat tours with distinction. You've never given me reason to doubt your judgment. Thank you, sir. That said, if you do something that brings negative attention to this unit or the Army, you'll be on your own. I understand. Take care of your family, Sergeant, and be smart about how you do it. The line went dead, leaving me with the weight of what I was contemplating. I'd just received tacit permission from my commanding officer to go outside legal channels if necessary. Now I had to decide whether that was a path I was willing to take. The answer came the next morning when I woke up to a call from Carol Martinez. Jessica, Marcus was here again last night. This time he tried to break into the building. My world went red around the edges. Is anyone hurt? No, but he got close. Security cameras caught him trying to pry open a ground floor window. He only left when the patrol car showed up. Where is he now? We don't know. His truck was gone by the time police arrived. I was already getting dressed. Carol, I need you to move my mother to a different location, today. We don't have anywhere else to send her. This is the only secure facility in the region. Then the secure facility isn't secure enough. I hung up and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the scared 12-year-old girl who'd watched her stepfather terrorize her mother for the first time. She wasn't even the staff sergeant who'd followed regulations and proper channels. She was something harder, something forged in desert heat and mountain cold, something that had learned the difference between justice and law. Marcus Webb wanted to play dangerous games. It was time to show him that some people were better at those games than others. I opened my closet and reached for the gear bag I'd brought home from my last deployment. Inside were items that weren't standard issue, tools I'd acquired during 2 tours in hostile territory, things that could level the playing field between a desperate man with hunting rifles and a trained soldier with military-grade equipment. Marcus had made this personal when he started threatening my mother. Now I was going to make it permanent. The hunt was about to begin. The call came at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday. Carol Martinez's voice was tight with fear and exhaustion. Jessica, he took her. I was already reaching for my clothes before my brain fully processed the words. What do you mean he took her? He broke into the safe house around midnight, he disabled the security system somehow, got past our locks, and kidnapped my mother from her room. The overnight staff found a note.
My hands were shaking as I pulled on my boots. What did the note say? It says if you want to see Elena alive again, you need to come to the old mining camp up on Copper Ridge, alone. No police, no backup, just you. I knew the place. Copper Ridge was an abandoned mining site about 20 miles outside Millbrook, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that wound through dense forest. It was isolated, defensible, and far enough from town that gunshots wouldn't be heard. Marcus had chosen his ground well. Carol, I need you to call Detective Garcia immediately. Tell him what happened, but tell him to stay back until I give the all clear. Jessica, you can't go up there alone. This is exactly what he wants. I know what he wants, but he's got my mother, and I'm not leaving her with that psychopath any longer than necessary. I hung up and opened my gear bag, selecting items with the cold precision of someone preparing for combat. night vision goggles, tactical vest, my service pistol and extra magazines, a knife that had seen action in Afghanistan, a small radio for communication with backup when the time was right. As I drove toward Millbrook in the pre-dawn darkness, I thought about Marcus's psychology. He'd escalated to kidnapping because the legal system had failed to give him what he wanted, control over my mother and revenge against me. Now he was offering a trade, my mother's life, for a chance to confront me on his terms. What Marcus didn't understand was that his terms were about to become my terms. I parked my truck 2 miles from the mining camp and hiked the rest of the way through thick forest, using the terrain to stay hidden while I scouted the area. The old mining camp consisted of several abandoned buildings arranged around a central clearing. Rusted equipment and collapsed structures provided plenty of cover, but also plenty of places for an ambush. Through my night vision scope, I could see Marcus's truck parked near the largest building, probably the old administrative office. Light flickered from inside the structure, candles or a lantern. He was trying to create atmosphere, to control the environment of our confrontation. I spent an hour mapping the area, identifying sightlines, escape routes, and defensive positions. Military training had taught me never to enter a hostile situation without understanding the tactical landscape. At 6 a.m., just as the sun was starting to rise over the mountains, I approached the main building. The door was propped open, and I could hear Marcus's voice from inside. "I know you're out there, Jessica. Your mother's been telling me all about her daughter, the war hero. Come inside so we can settle this like adults." I stepped through the doorway with my weapon raised and immediately assessed the situation. Marcus was standing behind an overturned table about 15 feet away, using it as cover. My mother was zip-tied to a chair beside him, conscious but clearly terrified. Marcus had a rifle pointed in my general direction, but his stance was sloppy, unprofessional. "Let her go, Marcus. Your problem is with me." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My problem started with you, but it's bigger than that now. You destroyed my marriage, turned my wife against me, made me a laughingstock in my own town. I documented your abuse. I helped my mother escape. You destroyed your own marriage when you decided hitting women was acceptable." "Shut up!" Marcus screamed. "You don't know anything about real relationships, about what it takes to keep a family together. You ran off to play soldier instead of staying home where women belong." I kept my weapon trained on him while scanning for tactical advantages. The building had windows on 3 sides, giving me multiple sightlines. Marcus had positioned himself poorly. He was silhouetted against the window behind him, while I remained in the shadows near the door. "You want to talk about playing soldier?" I said. "Let's talk about your military service." "Oh, that's right. You never served. You've never put your life on the line for anything except your own ego." "I didn't need the military to teach me how to be a man." "No, but you might have learned something about honor, about protecting people instead of terrorizing them." Marcus's grip on the rifle tightened. "You think you're better than me because you've got fancy training and government equipment? You think that makes you special?" "I think it makes me better prepared for this situation than you are." "We'll see about that." The standoff continued for several minutes, with Marcus becoming increasingly agitated and my mother growing more frightened. I needed to end this quickly before someone got hurt. "Marcus, here's what's going to happen. You're going to put down the rifle and let my mother go. Then you and I are going to have a conversation about the choices you've made." "I'm not putting anything down. You're going to drop your weapon and get on your knees, or I'm going to put a bullet in Elena's head." He swung the rifle toward my mother, and that's when I moved. Military close-quarter combat training kicked in automatically. I rolled behind a support post as Marcus fired, the bullet splintering wood inches from where I'd been standing. Before he could chamber another round, I was already repositioning, using the building's layout to get a better angle. "You messed, Marcus. That's the difference between someone who shoots targets at the range and someone who's been shot at by people who shoot back." He fired again, this time in panic rather than precision. The bullet went wide, shattering a window on the far side of the building. "You're wasting ammunition. How many rounds do you have left? 4? 3? I've got enough to kill both of you." But his voice cracked when he said it, and I knew he was starting to realize he was in over his head. I used his momentary distraction to move closer, staying low and using the abandoned equipment for cover. When I was within 10 feet of his position, I made my final move. "Marcus Webb, you are under citizen arrest for kidnapping, assault, and violation of a restraining order." He spun toward my voice, rifle raised, but I was already on him. Years of hand-to-hand combat training culminated in a single precise movement. I disarmed him, put him on the ground, and had him in restraints before he fully understood what had happened. "You can't do this," he gasped, face pressed against the dirt floor. "You're not a cop anymore. You don't have authority here." "I don't need authority. I have training, preparation, and a better understanding of tactics than you will ever have." I secured Marcus with zip ties from my gear bag, then rushed to free my mother. Her hands were shaking, but she was physically unharmed. "Mom, are you okay?"
Did he hurt you? I'm fine, Mija. Scared, but fine. He just kept talking about how he was going to teach you a lesson about respecting your elders. I helped her to her feet and activated the radio to call Detective Garcia. "Target secured. Scene is safe. Need immediate backup and medical assistance." Garcia's response came through clearly. "Copy that. Units are already en route to your location." As we waited for backup to arrive, Marcus continued his verbal assault from the floor. "This isn't over, Jessica. You think you've won, but you've just made everything worse. I'll get out of jail eventually, and when I do, I'll finish what I started here." I knelt down beside him and spoke quietly so only he could hear. "Marcus, let me explain something to you. I've served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan. I've been trained by the United States Army in advanced tactics, marksmanship, explosives, and psychological warfare. I have friends and resources you can't imagine." His eyes widened as the implications sank in. "If you ever threaten my mother again, if you even say her name in public, I will consider it an act of war. And trust me, you don't want to go to war with someone like me." The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, growing louder as the convoy of police vehicles navigated the dirt road to the mining camp. Detective Garcia was the first through the door, followed by a team of Colorado State police officers. They took Marcus into custody while paramedics checked on my mother. "Sergeant Rivera," Garcia said, pulling me aside, "I need your account of what happened here." I walked him through the entire incident, from Marcus's kidnapping of my mother to the tactical resolution of the hostage situation. Garcia took notes, asked clarifying questions, and documented everything for his report. "You did good work here," he said finally. "Textbook hostage rescue. Marcus Webb is looking at serious federal charges for kidnapping across state lines. With his pattern of escalating violence, he's going to prison for a very long time. What about the self-defense aspects of the situation? Clean shoot, so to speak. He fired first. You responded with appropriate force. Your military training probably saved both your lives." As Marcus was loaded into the patrol car, he looked at me one final time. The rage was still there, but underneath it was something new: fear. For the first time in his life, Marcus Webb had encountered someone who was better at violence than he was, and that knowledge was going to eat at him for the rest of his days. The trial took place 3 months later in the Colorado Springs Federal Courthouse. Marcus had hired a new lawyer, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Kidnapping, assault, stalking, violation of protective orders, weapons charges. The list went on for pages. My mother testified with quiet dignity, describing years of abuse and the terror of being kidnapped from what should have been a safe space. I testified about the tactical situation at the mining camp, the threats Marcus had made, and the resolution of the hostage crisis. But the most damaging testimony came from Marcus himself. Against his lawyer's advice, he took the stand and proceeded to rant about ungrateful women, the military-industrial complex, and his right as a husband to discipline his wife however he saw fit. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Judge Catherine Rodriguez sentenced Marcus Webb to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years. She cited his pattern of escalating violence, his complete lack of remorse, and the danger he posed to society. "Mr. Webb, your actions represent a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be a man in American society. Real men protect the vulnerable, they don't terrorize them.
Real men take responsibility for their actions. They don't blame others for their failures. As the bailiff led Marcus away in shackles, he looked at me one final time. The rage was still there, but it was impotent now, contained behind bars and legal walls that even his rage couldn't break through. Outside the courthouse, my mother and I stood in the Colorado sunshine, breathing free air and feeling the weight of 14 years of fear finally lifted from our shoulders. "It's really over, isn't it?" she said. "It's over, Mom. Marcus Webb will never hurt you again." She took my arm as we walked toward the parking lot. "I'm proud of you, mija. Not just for what you did at that mining camp, but for never giving up on me, for seeing me as someone worth saving when I couldn't see it myself. You saved yourself, Mom. I just provided backup." 6 months later, my mother was living in her own apartment in Colorado Springs, working at the Base Exchange and slowly rebuilding her life. She'd made new friends, started taking art classes, and for the first time in years, her laughter came easily and often. I returned to my duties at Fort Carson with a deeper understanding of what it meant to serve and protect. The skills the Army had taught me weren't just for overseas deployments. They were tools that could be used to defend justice anywhere it was threatened. Marcus Webb faded into memory, a cautionary tale about what happens when toxic masculinity meets superior training and unwavering determination. His threats and bluster had been revealed as the empty posturing of a weak man who had never faced real consequences for his actions. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if Marcus still thought about that morning at the mining camp. If he remembered the moment he realized he wasn't the most dangerous person in the room. If he understood, finally, the difference between real strength and the illusion of power that comes from terrorizing someone weaker than yourself. But mostly, I didn't think about Marcus Webb at all. He was yesterday's threat, neutralized and contained. My focus was on tomorrow, on protecting the people who needed protecting, and on living up to the oath I'd sworn to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Some battles are fought in foreign countries against obvious enemies. Others are fought in abandoned mining camps against the monsters who hide behind familiar faces. The location doesn't matter. What matters is standing up for what's right, regardless of the personal cost. Marcus Webb had called me all talk when this started. He'd learned the hard way that some people have more to back up their words than others. And sometimes, the quiet ones are the most dangerous of all. My mother was free. Marcus was in prison. Justice had been served with precision and finality. The mission was complete. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.